Let's take you now to New York, where a school board meeting was held 2 days ago in result to a bullying that happened in Long Island. A bunch of parents in New York are accusing the school district of not bullying. Parents in Lyndhurst, Long Island are accusing school district officials of ignoring bullying and under-reporting violent incidents in the wake of a 12-year-old stabbing a 13-year-old at a middle school last month. So what's the anger all about? Watch.
Meeting on Long Island. A school board meeting on Long Island. Parents there accuse the district of ignoring bullying and underreporting violent incidents. This all comes after a 12-year-old stabbed a 13-year-old in a middle school last month. Fox 5's Linda Schmidt has been speaking to concerned parents. She joins us live from Lindenhurst tonight. Linda.
That's right there, Teresa and Natasha. Well, first of all, that stabbing you're talking about, that happened just 2 weeks ago. And some parents say they have been sounding the alarm to the school board here for more than a year, but that their concerns have fallen on deaf ears.
They're very disconnected to what's really going on in the schools.
Some parents of middle school children in Lindenhurst, Long Island, say the bullying and violence in the school is out of control. This cell phone video shows a 12-year-old boy fighting with and stabbing a 13-year-old boy in the hallway just 2 weeks ago. Jeannie Saylor says her daughter was repeatedly bullied during her 7th grade school year and says the Board of Education ignored it. She is calling them out of touch.
They need to resign. I'm telling them that they are outdated, their time has expired, because most of those people sitting on that board have been sitting there for 20 years and have adult children, do not have children within the school system, so they don't feel it the way I feel it.
Some of the parents we spoke with feel the board dismisses the parents' concerns.
We have a bullying culture that starts at the top.
There was one moment when the room was united. Everyone clapping for a science teacher and a security guard. They both applied tourniquets to the 13-year-old boy's leg after the stabbing. Joe Salamone is with the Long Island Coalition Against Bullying. He says the coalition has worked with the middle school's administrators.
I do know that they care. I was in the building for 9 days, going into every classroom, talking to the kids personally.
When was that?
That was in end of January and the first week of February.
We believe this to have been an isolated incident, yet that does not mean we, the board, our administration, our staff, and our partners in education have been or ever will be complacent.
And by the way, the school superintendent, who you just heard at the very end of my story there, my report, he also said that they have been speaking with law enforcement about the possibility of putting in metal detectors and conducting random searches at the schools. However, that is just in the talking phase right now. Back inside to you.
All right, Linda, thank you.
Now during that time, there was an anti-bullying march.
Enjoy our free
March against bullying in Marysville a week after a 14-year-old student took her life at Lyndhurst High. The rally meant to let struggling students know they are not alone.
Always talk to someone if you have something going on, and don't ever act like you're alone, because if anyone needs to talk, I'm here to speak out. As much as people say that, truly, you might look at your mom and think, oh, she doesn't care, but at the end of the day, she does.
And just like those students said, help is available. The Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available 24/7. Just call or text 988.
If people are going to schools neglect because of what happened, let me tell you, work needs to be done to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Now there's something that happened days ago. If you're in Del Mar College, you may have witnessed, if you're in Texas, you may have witnessed some threats that have been happening at Del Mar and a lot in Texas. Take a look at this.
This next disturbing story, at least 8 Texas colleges were victim of hoax calls regarding active shooters, including our very own Del Mar College. The calls came in just before 10:30 this morning, naming the Del Mar College Heritage Campus as the scene for that fake shooting. The college quickly issued a shelter-in-place warning for students and staff. Corpus Christi Police and Del Mar Security issued an all-clear for the campus just 20 minutes later. Del Mar College, not the only campus affected by today's fake active shooter calls. 8 colleges across Texas also hit with the hoax, including Texas A&M University in College Station, Baylor University in Waco, and Texas Wesleyan in Fort Worth.
Well, when I first heard it, I was a bit hesitant because I wanted to know if it was true or if it was also a hoax.
I don't think nothing happened, especially at junior college. It's not a big university, I was like, why here?
Yeah, you always hear about it, but you never think it could happen to you. So it was kind of scary. It started shaking really bad.
Texas DPS releasing this statement tonight, saying in part, DPS is continuously monitoring events and their impact on public safety. While we do not discuss operational specifics, DPS will continue to work with local law enforcement and adjust operations as needed and address any potential threats, end quote. The FBI now says it'll work with local, state, and federal law enforcement to gather more information on who made this threat.
Wow. But there's probably more to this. Coming up next, we're going to hear from Brandon Shaft as from the same 8 colleges. And still ahead, are you planning a trip to Mexico for your holiday weekend trip? Don't do it after you watch Elizabeth Vargas' investigation south of the border. Stay with us. We've heard there was 8 active hoax threats happening. And in just a minute, I'm going to reread to you what the FBI has put out to warn all you guys all about these hoax threats. I'm a fan of mine. But it's something not to be kidding around. When you're dealing with something like this, it's not a joke. Even if it was a college student making a prank phone call, to you it's a prank. To others, it's not funny. If it was funny, it's not. If it was funny today, it probably was not funny as of now. But what you need to start realizing is I could go to jail if I continue doing this. You're damn right. If you continue doing this, you will go to jail. Ain't no if, and, buts, or excuses. So what more's being done? Here's Brandon Shaft.
Good evening, Leslie and Rudy, and the incident today comes not long after a March 23rd call of an active shooter, also on the same campus, but at Collegiate High School. Both incidents were a hoax, and no shooter was found on campus. And it wasn't just Del Mar's Heritage Campus that received this frightening hoax call today. 8 colleges and universities across Texas receiving similar fake threats of an active shooter. This map showing where those calls happened and law enforcement investigating to see if they're related.
This turned out to be a hoax call, but we're going to treat every single one of these calls that come into our dispatch as if it's, an actual active shooter call.
CCPD received the hoax call about an active shooter at 10:15 a.m. Thursday. Lieutenant Michael Pena said officers searched for a suspect but did not find anyone on the Del Mar Heritage Campus. He said even a hoax call like this can affect everyone involved.
You're putting a lot of people in fear, students, faculty, parents. I don't understand the mentality of somebody that would call in a hoax.
3 News spoke with students on the campus who were notified by the school and warned to shelter in place. They were notified after about 19 minutes that it was a hoax. Given the all clear, there was no shooter.
When I first heard it, I was a bit hesitant because I wanted to know if it was true or if it was also a hoax.
Relief, but also frustration.
You never play a game with 911. It's a waste of their time. They got emergencies to go to, and they don't have time for games like this at all.
Del Mar officials said they are aware of other hoax calls around Texas, but are not in contact with other schools. The call was documented, and a CCPD detective will investigate. The caller faces charges of false alarm or report, a Class A misdemeanor. When multiple active shooter calls happen in different areas, Pena said the situation is addressed at each location first. Then law enforcement works together with other departments to aid in the investigation.
Is there a possibility that they could be related? Maybe that other agency has some information that we don't have. It's important for us to share information with those other law enforcement agencies, help each other out to get this solved.
When asked if they were satisfied with the emergency response on campus today, Del Mar officials say that safety protocols were followed in response to the call and will continue to work closely with CCPD and others to address the concerns. And they say that safety is a top priority and the well-being of students, and are offering extended services and sessions in the college's counseling office if students need it. Leslie, Ruby.
All right, thank you, Brent.
Okay. Let me read. Okay, switching from this side here. Let's read out to what the FBI has posted, and I'd have to applaud. I gotta applaud to one of my fans for sharing this, for sharing what the FBI has posted, because really, none of this is being taken very seriously. A lot of people think that this is a joke, but it isn't a joke. When you're dealing with hoax threats, when you're doing this, then you got to realize there are serious consequences. But we've all had to raise, what we all need here is some common sense. You get it here? You probably don't. Because a lot of y'all want to go, oh, I hate school, blah, blah, blah. You want to prank call 911 because of this. The FBI takes this very seriously, and they put out stuff like this. Hoax threats are crimes. This is from the article. I probably read this to you. I'm going to read it to you again because you guys don't understand common sense. Hoax before you post. That's the common sense. Examples. This example right here. Another example. 21-year-old South Carolina man was sentenced to 1 year in federal prison after he sent text messages claiming there was a bomb in a parking lot of Veterans Affairs Medical Center in the state. Like, again, what should you do? Don't ever post or send any hoax threats online. Period. Don't ever. If you are a target of an online target, alert your local law enforcement immediately. If you see a threat of violence posted on social media, immediately contact local law enforcement or your local FBI office. Members of the public can always submit a tip to the FBI. Notify authorities, but don't share or forward the threat until law enforcement has had a chance to investigate. This can spread misinformation and cause panic. If you're a parent or a family member, know that some young people post these threats online as a cry for attention or as a way to get revenge or exert control. Talk to your child about the proper outlet for their stress or their emotions, and explain the importance of responsible social media use and consequences of posting hoax threats. The FBI is taking very seriously. This is from the director of FBI, David Bulwich. He said, hoax threats disrupt school, waste limited law enforcement resources, and put first responders in unnecessary danger. We also don't want to see a young person start out adulthood with a felony record over an impulsive social media post. Exactly. There's your common sense right there. I mean, you may think, I'm just joking, I'm just messing around. And hey, I understand. I understand completely. But, do you want to go to jail? Clearly, I don't want to go to jail. If I made a hoax threat, I would seriously go to jail and think about that while I'm in prison. You've got to learn that when you choose to be here, you choose the consequences. There's your common sense right there. Alright. Moving on now. Backpacks are banned for the 2nd and 5th graders at Fay Webb Elementary after weapons were found in those backpacks. I'm so sorry about that. All right, now let's take a look.
The Webb Elementary backpacks are banned for all 2nd through 5th graders for the remainder of the school year. This comes after 2 weapons were found in student backpacks. The incident happened on Wednesday. School administrators were alerted yesterday. School officials say clear backpacks will be acceptable only if they are needed. School officials are urging parents to talk with their children about bringing weapons to class.
Exactly. You never ever bring weapons, even if it's a toy weapon, like we talked about. Kids have been suspended for bringing weapons. Clear backpacks need to be acceptable. That's your common sense. Mandate clear backpacks. That's the common sense. And now, coming up next, these people were attacked by these people in a taxi after boarding a trip to Mexico. What in the world, what the hell is going on in Mexico? Elizabeth Vargas has some details. Stay with us. I got a question for you. Are you thinking about traveling to Mexico for the summer holidays or for the weekend? You better watch out. Don't you do it until you see this investigation into what happens. Tonight, you're going to meet people who say they have been attacked by people in taxis. What in the world is going on? Because there are dangers of Americans driving to Mexico. And according to these comments, it's like, nobody wants to travel to Mexico. So what can you do when you're traveling to Mexico? Here's Elizabeth Vargas with the 2020 investigation.
The white sands and blue waters of Mexico entice millions of Americans every year. Its beautiful beaches and warm weather are close, and vacations there are relatively inexpensive. For Stephanie Ness, a trip to Mexico City held the added attraction of meeting her boyfriend Paul's relatives.
It was 3 days of just fun. Went hiking up the pyramids and met his whole family, and the food and the colors, and it was amazing.
But Stephanie had no idea how easy it was to become a victim of crime in Mexico, until she and Paul did something most Americans do without thinking. They hailed a cab.
We sat back and sort of talking about the evening, and all of a sudden he stopped at a stop sign and he unlocked the door. And right then, these 2 guys jumped into the cab. These people were holding knives, and they were very panicked. They were like, don't, close your eyes, put your head down, don't move, don't move, don't move.
The goal was robbery. The couple was quickly stripped of their credit cards, cash, and jewelry, but the abduction continued.
And that is where my red panic light just went on, like, okay, it's been about 15 minutes. Why are they not letting us out of the car? I mean, as a woman, it crosses your mind. Am I going to be raped? Are they going to lock me up? And it's a horrible feeling when someone else is in total control and there's just nothing you can do.
The terror lasted 40 minutes until robbers finally released the couple unharmed, but in a bad neighborhood with no money to get home. What happened to Stephanie and her boyfriend is not unusual. A 2020 investigation reveals an alarming number of Americans are being attacked in taxis, on buses, some even on the beach. Yet most visitors to Mexico know nothing about the crimes there or how to protect themselves. Franny Rook was robbed in a taxi last October.
2 young guys jumped in their black leather jackets. They were on our laps, and my friend is screaming. And they had knives. They were little knives, and they were their hands on our mouth, and they wanted our PIN numbers.
They wanted your ATM cards.
They wanted our ATM card number. PIN, PIN, PIN. That's what they kept saying. I mean, I have kindergarten Spanish. My friend had none.
Before you left, did your travel agents, anybody helping you make your travel arrangements, did anybody warn you about not getting into cabs in certain places or at certain times?
No.
Never heard anything about that?
I never did. Never did.
What Stephanie and Franny didn't know is that Mexico was in the midst of a massive crime wave brought on by a severe economic crisis.
These are not the pictures you'll see in the travel brochures, but this is reality in Mexico these days. Local news cameras last year watched armed bandits work in the open, using their guns to stop cars so they could rob the passengers. On another street, a team of muggers operates with apparent impunity, leaving a man unconscious in broad daylight. Just 15 minutes later, the same group attacks another victim. And during it all, a police officer stands just a few yards away. In fact, widespread police corruption is a big part of the problem here, according to criminologist Rafael Ruiz.
You don't know when you're talking to a police officer if he's clean or if he's a crook.
Well, my bet is that he's not clean.
You bet he's a crook.
And it's not only my bet, it's the bet of the whole population.
Mexicans might know to be wary of men in uniform, but tourists Terry Mamilis and David Forsberg had no idea. They flew into Mexico City 2 years ago on a low-cost, late-night flight. Their plan was to catch the first bus out to the countryside in the morning.
We didn't even leave the airport.
The trouble started when the men wandered outside the terminal. They say a van pulled up and men wearing police uniforms got out and started yelling at them.
We were looking for the bus terminal and we're pointing our fingers asking where it was. And that's where they proceeded to push us towards the Suburban.
What do? Put their arms around you and lead you? Or?
Yeah,
that's exactly what
exactly like that. Just put their arms right around my back and started pushing me right along.
I was screaming, what's going on? I got hit in the back of the head with a billy club.
And they overpowered you, they hit you with the billy club and forced you into the Suburban.
Yes.
For more than 2 hours, the men say they were driven around, blindfolded, gagged, and forced to endure repeated beatings by 5 men in police uniforms who seemed to be enjoying themselves.
You could hear what they were saying, a lot of laughter, a lot of craziness. At one point, they took my bank card out and they were shoving it in my face. And I'd say, okay, I'll give you money, and that's when I would get smacked.
How many times do you think you were beaten?
I'd say over 50 times.
Eventually, the men say they were thrown out of the van in a run-down neighborhood, still bound and now bleeding with only the clothes on their backs. Everything else had been stolen.
In the past several years, an increasing number of Americans south of the border have been mugged, kidnapped, carjacked, and worse. In Mexico, the capital city is by far the most dangerous destination. Police statistics published in a local newspaper report that in January, an average of 2 Americans were attacked here every day.
Last December, American businessman Peter Zarate was killed in a taxi robbery. And in April, Texas Monthly Magazine writer Jan Reed was shot and critically wounded. The U.S. State Department considers the situation in Mexico City so serious, it has issued a stern public announcement warning travelers never to hail taxis on the street. But when we showed that warning to dozens of American passengers at the Mexico City airport, only a few knew anything about it.
I'm concerned at this very moment.
I think we should have been warned.
I should have been warned
about it.
Our travel agent should have said something, I would think.
But how many travel agents actually tell clients about dangers that might make them cancel their plans?
I'd like to get some information, please, on a trip to Mexico that I might be planning.
We talked to 25 travel agents around the country, and only 4 warned us about taxi robberies. No one said anything about corrupt police.
Then now it's perfectly safe there? In all parts of the city? Okay.
Steve Laux is the communications director for the American Society of Travel Agents, which he says represents about half the travel agents in the U.S.
Shouldn't travel agents be telling their customers not to get into taxi cabs in Mexico City, largest city in the world?
Certainly if they're aware. Yes.
And you're saying it's entirely conceivable that they're not aware of that?
It's entirely conceivable that they're not aware of every single thing, any type of event that is maybe endangering citizens.
But here's what the U.S. government has to say about 1998's top spring travel destination.
Travelers should totally avoid hailing Volkswagen bus taxis and other cabs on the street.
This This is a recording from the information line at the State Department in Washington. Anyone can call this line, and travel agents have access to all this information in their computers.
Americans are advised to be careful when ordering beverages in local nightclubs and bars. Some establishments may contaminate or drug the drinks. Americans should be cautious in using ATM cards and machines. Users are frequently targeted by criminals who have beaten victims to discover PIN numbers and then held victims until the next day to again use the card.
On and on. The recording of what's called a consular information sheet describes dangers even safety-conscious Americans probably wouldn't know. For instance, luxury buses like the ones many tourists take to go from Mexico City to Acapulco are frequently robbed. And driving anywhere at night is strongly discouraged. And in some places, even daytime travel is dangerous.
Highway 15 and Expressway Highway 1 in the state of Sinaloa are particularly dangerous, where criminal assaults and murders have occurred day and night.
We'd like to travel down the coast visiting all the different beach communities. Is that possible to do?
Even when we pressed, asking about nighttime driving in areas specifically listed as extremely dangerous, most of the travel agents we spoke to said nothing about the warnings.
Nothing anywhere. It's perfectly safe as far as you know?
Keep in mind that there are more than 150 different countries around the globe. The average travel agent is not going to know every single consular information sheet that the State Department has.
Where is Mexico on the list of most popular destinations?
Mexico is in the top 5.
So shouldn't they know about Mexico?
They should know about the particular destinations that are most popular within Mexico.
Shouldn't they know that the State Department warns you shouldn't be traveling on the highways in Mexico at night?
Not necessarily.
Why not?
Because the destinations in Mexico that most people travel to are destinations that are deemed relatively safe.
Indeed, American tourists who go to Cancun and other popular beach resorts are not often victimized. But veering off the beaten path even a little bit can be extremely dangerous. Carol Schlossberg was raped and murdered last March on a beach just outside the resort of Puerto Escondido.
She was most likely attacked, maybe put up a fight. Some people say they saw a man and a woman fighting. We believe she was unconscious when she was carried or dragged into the water where she drowned.
It was Carol's passion for vintage motorcycles that brought her to Mexico with her new love, Tim Quartz. The couple had been on a 2-month motorcycle adventure when they decided to stay a few days at the Papaya Surf bungalows. Tim stayed to work on the bike, while Carol went for a walk on the beach shortly after noon. It was one of her favorite things to do. Carol's brother-in-law, Jim Bazan, believes Carol was attacked because she walked alone.
Mexican women will never travel anywhere by themselves. They always go with a companion, another woman, a friend, or whatever. They know better than to do that because these things do happen.
Do you know whether or not when Carol and Tim went to Mexico, were they at all aware of any of the dangers of traveling to that country?
Did Carol or Tim ever think that taking a stroll at noon on an extremely popular tourist beach where the Mexicans take their holidays, where their families have picnics, did they ever think that taking a stroll on this beach would end up in an attack, sexual violation, and an intentional drowning? Of course not.
You as a traveler have a responsibility to protect yourself. You should try to gather as much information as you possibly can. And it's as simple as just saying to your travel agent, what information can you provide me that the State Department provides you about Mexico?
But bad things can happen, even to tourists who inform themselves carefully of the dangers they face when traveling. And you might think then that help is just a phone call away at the American Embassy. But wait till you see what we found when we come back.
So when we return, wait till you see what 2020 found when bad things happen at the border. Stay with us. Now a brief update in Oxford as we're still following the case of Ethan Crumbley. In Prentick, Michigan, the officer was once again ordered to remain lodged in jail during Friday's monthly placement hearing as as his sentencing hearing looms. Each month, the now 16-year-old shooter must appear in court for a hearing in which the judge decides whether to continue to lodge him in the jail instead of a juvenile facility. The shooter's attorney previously requested he be moved to juvenile detention because he is a minor. But the judge denied that request in March 2022, and he has since continued to keep the shooter in jail. The shooter appeared before a judge on Friday for another placement hearing. He was ordered to remain lodged in jail once again. The shooter previously scheduled to stand trial in January. He intended to plead guilty after he initially pleaded guilty to all the charges. He has since pleaded guilty to all 24 felony charges against him in connection with the mass shooting. He's been convicted with 1 count of terrorism causing death, 4 counts of first-degree murder, 7 counts of assault with intent to murder, 12 counts of possession of a firearm in the commission of felony. Last November, the Oakland Class prosecutor filed a motion to request the harshest sentence possible for the shooter after he admitted to planning and executing the massacre in that shooting. 4 of these victims. So that's probably all the evidence we have here. Okay, bad things can happen in Mexico. We've seen what happens when people get beaten up in taxis and robbed. When we come back, we'll show you those bad things.
Can you turn to the U.S. Embassy if you're in trouble in a foreign country? Elizabeth Vargas has a shocking discovery in Part 2 of our urgent travel advisory. Be warned before you head south of the border when 2020 Friday continues.
Stay with us. Returning to our story, people have traveled to Mexico for a great time, but most people have been beaten up by taxi drivers and corrupt officers. So if you're in trouble, could you go to the U.S. Embassy for help? Wait till you see what happens when you see bad things happening in south of the border. Once again, here's Elizabeth Vargas.
Guatemala is a jewel in the tropics. Just south of Mexico, it is stunningly beautiful. And here, more than anywhere else in the region, the ancient Indian cultures still thrive. All these things brought Carolyn Fraser to Guatemala when she wanted to learn the Spanish language. But Carolyn was not naive. Guatemala was just emerging from decades of civil war, and she knew there would be some risks.
I understand that travel has risks. I understand that Guatemala has some violence. But I felt like from all the research I did, weighing it all together, I felt safe to go.
Carolyn's father, Charles, and her sister Elizabeth joined her for a vacation toward the end of her 3-month stay. The reunion went well until the family split up one fateful afternoon. Charles headed back to Guatemala City for a flight to the U.S. the next morning. Elizabeth went with Carolyn.
We were on our way back up to my school for her to go to classes with me for a couple days, hang out, meet my friends up there, meet my teachers.
The Frasers did their homework before coming to Guatemala. They'd even read the U.S. State Department's consular information sheet describing vicious criminal attacks on tourists in certain parts of the country. They had also heard tourist buses were sometimes targets of highway robberies. So when they traveled from this popular tourist town, they hired a private car and driver, and they took the highway characterized as the safest route.
So you were taking what was the safest route of travel you could find. You were in a private car as opposed to...
The safest that existed.
That existed. You thought you'd done everything right.
Yeah.
The women knew not to travel after dark, so they and 2 friends set off at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, in time to reach their destination by nightfall. Carlos Mateo was their driver.
And the 5 of us were just having a really nice conversation. And then I just looked up at one moment and I noticed there were men in the road, and I noticed that there was a tree in the road. And there wasn't a lot of time to take it all in, but I do remember that I had time to think, no, wait a minute, those guys are wearing ski masks.
Pero vi acá, vienen corriendo.
You saw them coming running?
When Carlos saw 3 men wearing ski masks, he knew immediately they were robbers and maybe rapists. So he swerved around the tree and tried to escape.
And that's when one of them shot at me.
At that point, I leaned forward and said, is everybody all right? And Elizabeth said, no, I got shot. She said it 2 times.
But in the voice that you hear now.
Right.
Elizabeth had been riding in the front passenger seat. The bandit's bullet went through her throat from left to right, shearing off a crucial part of her vocal cords.
I remember the window breaking. I remember the shot, the sound of it, the smell of it. And I remember feeling like a claw ripped across my throat.
Carlos began racing for the nearest hospital, which in this rural country was a full 45 minutes away.
What happened once you did get to the hospital?
I kept in Spanish saying, is my sister going to die? Is she going to die? Is she going to die? And they would say, it's very grave, it's grave.
Elizabeth desperately needed the quality of medical care available only in Guatemala City, 100 miles away. Fortunately, Charles Frazier was staying the night there.
You are an American citizen in a foreign country, and something incredibly horrible happens to your daughter. Did you call the embassy for help?
I did.
All U.S. embassies have emergency contact numbers for Americans in distress. Certainly, Charles Frazier was in distress, but here's what he says happened when he called the embassy in Guatemala City for help.
Basically, we determined very quickly that there was nothing I could do until the next morning when the consulate opened.
So you called the consulate at what time?
Well, it would have been around 10:30.
10:30 at night, and they told you to come back tomorrow morning?
Yes, that was the outcome of it.
After a sleepless night, Frazier did appear at the U.S. Embassy and waited in line to see a consular officer. And then, from behind a glass partition, the distraught father was given a printed list of hospitals in Guatemala City and some advice on which one might be best for Elizabeth. The embassy says it gave all the assistance Frazier requested, but Carolyn and Elizabeth were surprised the embassy did not take charge of their situation.
Because a lot of what we needed was logistical support. We needed to find the right airlifting transportation. It was a tricky matter to get the other hospital to agree to release her. We needed a spokesperson. We needed a spokesperson who spoke Spanish.
To deal with the bureaucracy.
Was the embassy helping you at all and getting you out of that smaller hospital into one where you could get the care you needed?
No.
In fact, it was a doctor at the hospital in Guatemala City who spent the entire day negotiating for Elizabeth to be airlifted in for emergency surgery. And then, a few days later, Elizabeth learned from that doctor that had she known what most everyone in Guatemala seemed to know, she could have avoided the shooting entirely.
He said, but we know where you got shot. That he is very aware that that's a dangerous area, particularly in the late afternoon. And I don't know why. But he said that was common knowledge amongst him and his peer group.
Among Guatemalans?
Yes.
That you were on a dangerous stretch of road at a bad
dangerous
time.
Time of day.
My father had the exact same response. When he went over to the embassy that next morning.
He clearly knew. He clearly knew that there were two spots on the Pan American Highway.
And one of those spots was where your daughters were
I think
dead.
he said it sounds like it was in the area called Little Alaska.
He was right, and so was her surgeon. They knew they were right.
And my question is, why was that area not mentioned on the State Department sheet?
There was no warning.
Not a single mention of that area.
James Rubin is the spokesperson for the U.S. State Department, which writes and distributes the consular information sheets.
They were told by the doctor at the hospital. Their father was told by somebody at the U.S. Embassy in Guatemala City. They all knew never to travel that stretch of highway in the afternoon. Right. Why didn't the Fraziers know that? They had done all their homework and had gotten the sheet. There's nothing on this sheet about that.
The victims of crime always have a very understandable reaction. I think if you or if I had been a victim of crime, we always feel that more can and should be done. And what we in the department try to do is do all that we reasonably can do and all that we possibly can do. The suggestion that the United States government can tell every traveler where every dangerous place in the world is not realistic.
How often do you update these consular information sheets?
Well, not daily. We update them when there's new information that requires updating.
But all through last year, more than 24 incidents of assault, armed robbery, and rape of U.S. citizens in Guatemala went unreported by the State Department. The consular sheet wasn't updated until September, 3 months after the Frasers were attacked. And it still does not warn travelers about the site of that attack.
The State Department sheet had said, do not travel this road in the afternoon. We would have prearranged our itinerary.
You wouldn't have been there.
In a heartbeat.
Rick Nuccio spent 4 years in the State Department. He says U.S. embassies are always dealing with conflicting objectives. Every time they put out a travel warning on a country, tourism is threatened, and the host government gets angry.
There is that tension. Do you want to do something that provides honest information to travelers, or are you going to hedge that travel warning a little bit, or are you going to treat it as a political exercise in which you change a few words here and there that will soften the blow, but also might mislead some Americans to thinking that things are better than they really are.
So the priority for that U.S. Embassy in Guatemala is relations with Guatemala?
Yeah. Now, I'm not speaking of this particular embassy in the year 1998, but as a pattern over the years, yes, that's true.
Our highest priority, our number one responsibility as the State Department is the protection of American citizens. And there is nothing, no policy, relationship with any particular government that affects this highest priority, which is to protect Americans, to provide the information we can in advance, and to help them after incidents occur.
But the Frasers are not the only family we found with serious questions about the priorities of U.S. embassies overseas. Jim and Linda Bazan say they were shocked at the U.S. response to the murder of Linda's sister, Carol Schlossberg. 3 weeks after the murder, they were furious.
The State Department has been useless. The embassy in Mexico City has been useless.
Carol was a well-known artist at Yale University. She was on vacation near the Mexican resort of Puerto Escondido when she was accosted on the beach, raped, and left to drown in the surf. The embassy did help get her body back to the U.S. for burial, but it was 4 days after the murder before it sent anyone to Puerto Escondido to check on the homicide investigation.
It doesn't make sense. What could be more important to our consulate in Mexico City than the murder of an American citizen on their turf? Well, I mean, what could possibly be more important?
We have language barriers and problems, so...
You can't call the police department in Puerto Escondido
No, so we need to rely on the embassy for that kind of information for us. We don't know how the authorities operate down there. We don't know the systems because they are different from ours, and they should be telling us how that works so we can understand what to expect.
And you've gotten none of that information?
No, none of that. None of that.
Instead, they say, after days of phone calls trying to get the embassy report on the investigation, they were faxed a letter from the State Department saying the report was private, and if they wanted it, they'd have to apply for it under the Federal Freedom of Information Act.
Be prepared, I was told. This can take some time, you know.
A Freedom of Information Act to find out about your own sister-in-law and the circumstances of her death?
Yes. So what the heck is the purpose? What is their function? I don't know.
The State Department points out that the embassy in Mexico has expressed concern about the case to Mexican authorities. And it says embassy officials are doing everything they can for the family. But the Bazans and the Frasers say their experiences have been painful lessons on what not to expect when trouble happens overseas.
People should be warned when they travel that the U.S. Embassy is not a 911 function for them.
So I'm basically on my own.
You really are.
We're told that the help a U.S. Embassy might provide varies dramatically from place to place. And the State Department faxed us letters from people who felt that when they were in trouble, they were well served. Since we first broadcast this story, crime in Mexico has only gotten worse. And the State Department has updated and strengthened its warnings about both Mexico and Guatemala. But the best advice is still do your homework before you travel. Get those consular information sheets. And remember, those sheets are only updated periodically. Since our story originally aired, there have been some arrests, and 2 people are awaiting trial in the murder of Carol Schlossberg.
So that's common sense to be thrown at you whenever you're traveling the border. So think next time and always do your homework. We'll be right back. Imagine going to get some lunch and then you realize you see a fight happen because somebody wanted food, but the server denied it because he was under the influence of alcohol. 7 years ago, a very viral video happened to where this guy wanted some bacon jalapeno mac and cheese. And what happened next escalated. Take a look.
Just give me some fucking bacon, some jalapeno mac and cheese. They're not gonna give me bacon mac and cheese. I just denied it. You can't come in here with an open ball of booze. Think about it. Think. Ask anybody here. If you want to walk in with a bottle of beer, can I have beer here? No. Why not? Why not? This is America. How old are you? Why? How old are you? 19. Okay, so why? She ain't going nowhere. Oh my God. Oh shit. I was just trying to get fucking. You don't do my assault to people. Chill out right now. Going to jail. I was literally you're going to jail. You're saying to the cops. You're gonna chill out. Say, don't move. Stay down and do not move. You are not moving at all. Just stay down and be quiet. You stay down and you be quiet. That's it. It's over. Show's over. One of the employees is straddling him. Well, then you're fucked. Oh, yeah. I just felt here. I'm just trying to get food. This guy comes on chest. I can't get food. Oh, yeah. Partner. Yeah, sure. I'm absolutely fucked. That's it. Fuck. Let me get my shoes. What the fuck happened to my shoes? Shit. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'll do it, sir. Yeah. Go do it, sir. Stand up, buddy. I can. All right, I'm gonna help you out, all right? Yeah. Ready? Come on. Stand up. Yeah. Go outside, so we're not going to hold on. It's my shirt. It's my keys. Put it in my fucking pocket. You get it.
Try Yukon Gold's bacon, jalapeno, fucking bacon, jalapeno, mac and cheese. Next time you're at Yukon, try that bacon, jalapeno, that fucking bacon, jalapeno, mac and cheese. It's worth getting arrested for. Now, after that video, he was arrested. He apologized and he was sorry. I would play you that, but we are out of time. Here's a portion of his apology.
My name's Luke, and I saw the video of me, and I'd like to just get a few things out there. I'm going to start by apologizing to all the staff involved in my incident, especially the manager, who was really he was just doing his job. Like, he gave me so many chances to walk away, and I didn't listen to him. I was just a complete asshole to him instead, and no one deserves to be treated that way, like, ever. And at the time, I was, to say the least, very intoxicated, and like, when I watched the video a few days later, I couldn't even believe that it was me in it. Like I was just watching it thinking, oh my God, like what the hell's wrong with me? Like this isn't what I'm all about, and like I don't treat people this way, and I am ashamed. I really am ashamed of myself. Yeah, like the thing that's always just gotten me into trouble is just my big mouth. I talk and talk. I don't know when to shut up. Being stubborn, being stupid. And I've got some problems that I am addressing, and this was seriously a wake-up call. And I'd also like to apologize to my friends and family who've always supported me for years, and I completely disappointed them, completely let them down. And I'd like to apologize to the university student body for representing it so poorly. Like it's not what UConn's all about. I totally misrepresented it, and I'm sorry for that. And yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say. Oh, actually, and to all those who want to send donations of mac and cheese to me, please just send it to your local food pantry. There's a lot of hungry people out there. Yeah.
Now, after that aired, both those videos, Justin Theroux was on Jimmy Kimmel, and it was a spoof of that viral video. He bought the rights to it. If we had time, I would show it to you. But we'll probably do that on Saturday. I come up on Saturday, the story of Chris McCandless. What was he thinking when he headed west? Rejecting his privileged life and his family. You will hear what happened, and you will also see what happened on that bus from years ago. The story of Chris McCandless. That's Give Me a Break for Friday going to Saturday. We'll see you again for Give Me a Break Saturday night. Remember, concentration, not strength. Good night.